So, welcome to Negotiation Mastery, Dr. Gloria Esomeme. This is your number one negotiation podcast for professional women. In this show, we talk about topics that give women leverage to negotiate for salary and work conditions they deserve. In each episode, we bring guests from different parts of the world, different stages in their careers, and from diverse backgrounds to share their journey and experience. I am your host, Dr. Gloria Esomeme. I am an internal medicine physician. I am a negotiation coach. I am a speaker. I have a master's in global health and a PhD in health services policy and management. And today, I have Dr. Michelle Gibbings with me. She's an executive coach based in Australia. She has over 30 years of experience helping organizations and individuals navigate the workplace. So she's what we call a workplace expert. She's written multiple books on how to thrive at work, both as a leader and as a member of the team. Michelle, I am so excited and honored to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yes. So Michelle, you have over 30 years of experience in your career, with majority of that time as a senior executive, and now you coach and mentor senior leaders. Do you mind sharing your journey with us on how you went from being how you got in and then you grew to the extent that you're helping people grow now?
What an adventure. It's one of those things. I think if someone had said to me when I was in my early teens, Michelle, this is the career that you would have, I would never have been able to plan it out. At my core, I love learning and I love being challenged. And so there have always been sort of two defining characteristics that have really helped shape some of the choices that I've made. But I've had, I spent initially some time in politics, then I went and worked in the mining sector, then I did a big chunk of my corporate career working in financial services. And I did everything from I was a company spokesperson, I ran large scale change programs, I was head of compliance, so I was the chief of staff. So I had a very unusual career in that I jumped functional disciplines. And then my last corporate gig was not all that much fun. And it became the impetus for me doing what I'm doing now. And I still remember the moment really distinctly. I'd been on a meditation retreat and I came home and said to my husband, I'm done. And he goes, done with what? And I said, done with corporate. And he goes, oh, excellent. What are you going to do? I said, I'm going to open a business. And he goes, in what? I said, I've got absolutely no idea. And, and I laugh a bit as I'm saying it now. And that was 11 years ago. And, once again, it came back to those core drivers. I knew that I loved learning. I loved being challenged. I also loved sharing knowledge and sharing insights. And that became the pathway into what I'm doing now. And, as you would appreciate doing what you're doing now as well, there's a series of almost experiments where you work out, well, where's that sweet spot? Where's that point where you really know that you're adding value and bringing something into the world that is meaningful both for yourself and for the people that you're working with. So I do both executive coaching work, I do facilitation, and I do speaking. But there is a real, soft spot for me in executive coaching because that's where you can see the real transformation happen, where people are in environments where they're really stuck
Yeah.
and you can help them navigate their way through that complex environment.
Yes. And for me, what made me so sure I didn't want to practice medicine full time anymore was the joy I was deriving, not from my patients coming back to say, oh, my A1C is better, my blood pressure is better, my health is better. Oh, you were the first person who told me I had AFib. You listened to my heart and you diagnosed that. That it gave me joy. But what gave me joy was someone walk into my room and say, hey, Dr. Sumeme, you know what? I've gone to register for the nursing program. I'm like, and I'm so happy. I run codes and people come back to life. It doesn't that it makes me happy because it's value I'm adding. It's being a doctor is the highest honor of my life. But what gives me the greatest joy is just adding value to people. And that value, you add value to somebody. And that value goes on. They add to another person, they add to another person. And it becomes this ripple effect that you have no idea how far your effect goes. But there was something interesting you talked about. You talked about politics. I read about you, but I didn't see that part about politics. Can you tell me a little bit about that part?
That was my first job out of university. And I still remember I've had some really I guess I've made some fairly brave moves and bold moves. And I still remember this because, I applied for a job in a different state to where I had grown up. And my parents at the time had no idea that I was even applying for jobs interstate. And they were overseas for work. And I rang my mum and I said, "Oh, I'm moving to Melbourne." And mum goes, "Oh, okay." She goes, "But you don't even own a car and you've never lived out of home before." And I said, "Oh, I know, but I'll figure it out." So I
Yes.
always had a fairly, in that sense, an independent streak, but I had this motto that sort of run through many aspects of my career, that I didn't want to live my life with regret. I didn't want that sense of, "Oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd tried that." And so I was always willing to do things that felt a little uncomfortable or challenging. That didn't mean I wasn't scared. It didn't mean that there wasn't fear, but I always saw the fear as a good thing because it was my way, like my brain's way of telling me, this is new. You haven't done it before. So, yes, working in politics was a very interesting environment. And it was fascinating because my second job, the person who hired me said, "Oh, I hired you not just because you worked in politics, but because you worked for a politician. And if you've worked for a politician, you'll put up with anything."
So what did you do for this politician?
I wrote speeches. I wrote media releases. So I was effectively their, media
Person.
sort of press secretary. And, it was amazing. I think about it. I was sort of, here I am fresh out of university. And
Yeah.
most of the people that I was coming into contact with who worked for other politicians, they were all, ex-journalists from big newspapers. And then they've said to me, "Oh, so what media outlet have you come from?" And I said, "Oh, I've just finished university." And they would look at me and go, "How did you get this job?"
How,
And I
you
said,
know what? That was what I was going to ask you. How did you get a job?
"Well, I applied for it, but also I, in the year previous, had done work experience with a senator. And that work experience, I think, was fundamental to being able to then, put on my CV that I had done work experience. And so, once again, it was, put yourself out there. It was seek the opportunity. And look, and politics was interesting. I really enjoyed it. But I said this to the politician that I worked for. I said, "I am a swinging voter. We live in Australia, it's a democracy. You can vote for whichever party you want to vote for." And I said, "I'm a swinging voter. I will change my, how I vote based on what's
Affiliation.
going
Yeah.
on." Yeah, exactly. And I said, "So I am not a card carrying member of the party that you work for." And she said, "No, that's okay." She goes, "I'm
Did you
hiring
say
you
that?
because of this."
Did you say that during your interview or when you were already
I
in
did.
there?
I did. I
That was
did because I needed her to know
your value.
that, yeah, my values, and also that I liked her. I liked what she stood for as a politician. She was a really, really good local member. She really cared about her community. And I was happy to work for her. There would
Yeah.
have been other politicians that I would not have been comfortable working
Working
with.
for. Well, wow. So there's something you talked about just about. So from what I hear you say, you were fresh out of what was your bachelor's in? What were you in university for?
Bachelor of Communication. So it was
Oh,
PR.
yeah. So it was the right background. So you okay? That makes sense. But how did you go from politics to finance?
So it was a little bit of a journey. So I went from politics to mining, and in the mining sector, I spent time working for relatively big companies. Once again, in that corporate affairs PR world, and also corporate public policy work, and then I was living in a small mining town in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And once again, it was for experience. And, when I did that, there were people who are horrified, particularly my father, who was going, "You're 25 and you're moving to a mining town in the middle of Australia. What are you doing?" And I said, "It's a great experience."
There
So
are
I
no
moved out.
there are no bars, there are no pubs. You can't really party, and you're
Oh, no, no,
25.
no, no, no. This is Mount Isa. Gloria, trust me, there are lots of pubs. And
Okay, okay. So you were in the right place. You were in the right place.
but it was an interesting environment. We could dine out all night on my stories from Mount Isa. So you should Google Mount Isa and you'll see where it is because it's this little dot in the middle of nowhere in the middle of Australia. But I went out there for the experience. I was 25. I was running their communications department, and you were dealing with really big, complex issues at a very early age. And then there'd been a change in leadership at the top, and that had always been a really important thing for me. Who am I working for? I needed to work for someone that, to me, there was real values alignment, but also that sense that I'm going to be learning something from them.
Right.
And the person that I was reporting to, who ran the site, they left for various reasons. They brought someone new in, really lovely person. But for me, the disconnect was, I'm not learning from you. And so I randomly applied for a role. We have the sort of national finance paper in Australia. So similar to like the Financial Times in the UK, is called the Australian Financial Review. And I saw this job advertised and I randomly applied thinking, I just want to test my marketability. I want to see whether I can actually get an interview. And I didn't say what company it was for or what industry. And I applied. And then I was in Sydney for holidays and I got a phone call saying, the person who runs this department, and they told me what it was. They said, it's ANZ. They want you to come in for an interview. I said, I'm here on holidays. I don't even have a suit. They said, they don't care. Just come in. So I did. We had a conversation that was in Sydney, and then I was flying to Brisbane 2 days later. They flew to Brisbane 2 days later, did the second round interview, and by the time I'm flying back to Mount Isa, I
You
had
got
the
a
job
job.
offer.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Mm.
So there's this thing about bravery. I think for any woman to thrive in life, not just anyone to thrive in life, you have to be brave. You have to go outside your comfort zone. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, so for me, sometimes people tell me I'm brave, and let me tell you, I'm in Dubai now. I quit my job, and everyone said, "Oh, why are you quitting your job? You have a great job." I did, but I said I just want to try something different. Up till last night, one of my friends, she was texting me. She was like, "Oh, my brother and I were talking about you. We think you're so brave." And for me, maybe because I've moved multiple times in my life, I didn't think it was brave. I was just like, "Oh, let me go try this thing out." The only time I got a little bit scared was I was moving my things. I was busy till the last minute. I got on the plane, got to Dubai, and then when I got to the place I rented, I'm like, what am I doing? 'Cause I don't even have a job here. It's not like I came for a job. I just moved. I was like, what am I doing? And then I had to sit down again and then went over my why. Okay, Gloria, you moved because you wanted something different. You moved because you wanted to express yourself in a way you didn't have the opportunity to express yourself while you were in the US. Not like the US was restricting me. I just wanted somewhere different. So do you mind telling me about talking more about bravery and how women can learn how to be brave and just get used to making those uncomfortable decisions, even when they don't see the other side of the tunnel, but just taking that leap of faith.
There's a couple of parts to it, Gloria. And I often say when we're feeling fear, it really is just your brain's job is to keep you safe. That's what it wants to do. It wants to keep you safe. And so when you're feeling fear, it's your brain going, I haven't done this before. This is, there's uncertainty. It's new. And so I flip it. I do the reframe. Rather than seeing the fear as a bad thing, I see it as a good thing because if I wasn't feeling a little bit of fear, one, I'm either not doing something that's new, I'm not stretching myself, or I'm not really caring about the outcome. And I want to care about the outcome. I want things to matter to me because I want to do well and I take pride in my work. And I also, to me, there's the milestone piece. So when I left corporate, and similar sort of thing, when I left corporate, there were people who said to me, firstly, how can you afford to do this? Like, this is crazy. You're walking away from sort of executive level salary to running a business, and you've never run a business and you don't seem to really know what you're going to be doing, like
Mhm.
definition of kind of crazy. And then they would say to me, you like, why? Like, why are you doing this? And I said, well, there's reasons. And I was really clear around the drivers. And I knew I needed that sense of autonomy. No longer so much was really hanging things on security. But I also gave myself a time. I said to myself, a year. Michelle, you've got a year to give this a go. And at the end of that year, if you're not earning enough money that's commensurate with the effort and the enjoyment that you're getting from it, then you really need to go back to corporate.
Oh,
And then what was really fascinating,
no,
yeah,
let me ask you a question. So it was more. So it was not. So the money you talked about was not necessarily if I'm not matching my previous salary. It was more like the enjoyment and the effort you're putting into it. That's a
yeah,
great.
it had to, yeah, to me, there was sort of a calibration piece because, and the calibration was effort. Am I putting in the effort where I go, I'm getting paid enough for that effort? And also because the salary that I was earning in corporate was pretty substantial.
Respect.
And
Yeah.
so I knew that to get back to that level would have
Wow.
taken a really long time. It's not something that would have happened overnight. And also the joy. And, it was, I was very fortunate. I always often say to women, one of the most important choices you can make is the person that you choose to spend your life with, and whoever that may be. And I made a very good choice in my partner, and he's amazing because he backs me. And so even when I look in that first year, we cut back expenses. And I remember at the end of the first year joking and saying to go, I think I just earned what I earned my first year out of university. Woo!
And this
And
was how many years after? This was how many years after?
30 years after leaving university. Um, and part of it was that sense of, because yes, the revenue was good, but you're putting the revenue back into the business to grow the business, all that kind of stuff. But there was that sense of joy and the fulfillment that you get. And I still remember in my first 8 months of running the business, and one of my first coaching clients at the end of our first engagement, she said to me, "You've changed my life." And I remember getting home and saying to Craig, "Oh my God, I'd do this for free." And he goes, "That's brilliant, Michelle. I really don't want you doing it for free though." But it was just that sense of, wow, I know I had good impact, not all the time, but I know that, through big chunks of my corporate career, I did have good impact. And you just go, I would never be able to get that feeling being in
Correct.
corporate. And so,
Yeah.
and this comes back into your world of negotiation. I often say to people, everything in life is a trade off. You can't do this because you do that. You put more energy here, you've got less energy for here. And so, when it came to me thinking at the end of that first year, am I doing the right thing? Am I in that right space? I was like, absolutely. Sure, I've traded off security. I've traded off
Right.
that sort of executive level paycheck. But what I've got in return is autonomy, a great sense of purpose, and a huge amount of flexibility to do work that I love in the way that I want to do it.
But Michelle, not everyone has that. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to trade off security. So for me, I was able to move because I had investment that I knew I was getting cash flow from, that even if I got to Dubai, I didn't get a job, I didn't have any, I would still be fine for a long time. So I had that, and I knew worst case scenario, if I'm in Dubai, it doesn't work out, I can always take my bags. My job, they said whenever I want to come back, I can. So I have that. So I don't want to be insensitive to those who don't have that cushion. Some people have spouses who would let them, jump and say, you know what, baby, you can go out. I'm holding the fort. I can take care of the finances. Why some they have family members who would say, we're going to sponsor this. Some people have savings. So for people who don't really have that cushion, what advice do you have for them?
One of the key things is be a saver, not a spender. And so throughout my career, I always, I used to work with people. They were all driving the big expensive cars, and I'd turn up in my kind of little Nissan Pulsar, and people used to think I was weird. And they'd go, I said, because particularly in my early life, when I was single, I was, I need to have security.
Yeah,
That whole thing, a man is not a financial plan.
right,
And I was very clear around the decisions that I wanted to make to set myself up for financial security. And I absolutely agree with you. Some people have a really, really tough life and there is no cushion. But there are also, and I see this with a lot of women who are on big salaries, and even that sort of, medium sized salary, and they just assume they're going to earn that forever and they don't save. They spend to their means. And so, whatever you do as you are building out your sort of plan for your life, always put a portion aside, and not so that you've got a buffer so that you can potentially, job jump if that's what you want to do, but also so that you've got a buffer so
correct.
that you're not trapped in a career that you hate
Correct.
because when you're not trapped by money, it gives you leverage. And I've been in really tricky situations at work where I've been able to pull the what I'd call leverage card
Yeah.
because I wasn't worried about losing my job. I
Correct.
knew I'd be able to find something else. And also that if I did have a period of time where I couldn't work or couldn't find work, I'd be okay. Yet I see a lot of people who are trapped by lifestyle choices they've made. And then they're stuck and they go, I can't get out. And actually, I can't afford to leave this job. I hate it. It's destroying me from the inside. And I go, don't do that. Just give yourself some wriggle room.
Yes. So I think if someone has a job, you should give yourself, if you have a good job, you should give yourself 2 years to have enough savings or investment. So that should be your goal. Because I remember when I started working as a physician, it was the salary was so big compared to what I was getting as a resident. I'm the opposite of you. I like luxury. I like nice cars. I like to fly business class. That's my guilty pleasure, right? However, I didn't start from day one. I told myself, whatever lifestyle I start is a lifestyle I know I can continue for the rest of my life. So by the time I bought my first business class ticket, I knew I'll be able to afford this for the rest of my life, all things being equal. So I think you have to grow to the extent that whatever you're spending, whatever lifestyle you don't let your lifestyle go beyond grow beyond your finance. Your finance should grow, and then your lifestyle should try to catch up with that. And luxury comes in different ways.
It
Luxury may be at some point in my life buying a $200 bag. That was like, I'm made. I'm made. Like, I bought a Coach purse. I'm made. That was it at that stage, because that was expensive, because I didn't have I wasn't making so much. So it was like, okay, I achieved this milestone. I want to get this to pay myself. And then when I did that, I would feel very accomplished. I've gotten to a stage in my life where I'm not there anymore, but at the same time, I'm not in a bad financial state. I was able to manage both, where I was rewarding myself for hard work. At the same time, I was investing. There's this, I was reading one of your books, Michelle, and it was talking about and one of your books, your newsletters, and it was how to say no. Some women are caught in an environment where when you are just starting out in your career, the older you get, you get more confident. As you get older, you can say no. You have enough savings, you can work out on that job and say, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to be here anymore. But there are people who are just starting out, and they're just eager to please. They say, oh, say yes to everything, you want to be seen everywhere. For me personally, I do not take thankless jobs. I don't just show up just for the purpose of showing up. Whatever I do, it has to be purposeful. It has to align with my values. It has to align with my goals. But not everyone is able to do that. So, how do you manage saying, because sometimes you have to be flexible and not like going against your values, but you may go beyond your job description. So at what, how do you advise people to manage saying no and saying yes in a strategic way?
Yeah. And it's about considering, and I agree. I've always been the sort of person who be the master of your own job description. A job
Mm,
description defines you like this, expand that job description. Work out what it is that you need, that you want to know, that you want to explore, that you want to experiment with. I was never bound by the confines of a job description. And so there's a huge amount of upside to saying yes to opportunities, yes to stretch assignments. Where the no piece comes in is that strategic sense of understanding. If I'm saying yes to this, what then I am do I need to say no to create the capacity to do that well? And sometimes when you're saying no, it's not a no forever, it's a no for now. I would love to be involved with that, but right now my attention is on this because of this connection with where the organization is going. Um, and you might be able to suggest somebody else who has the capacity to take that on, or that might be a stretch assignment for them. So whenever you're saying no, say it in a way that is positive. And I think the key thing for women, we can get a bit too apologetic. We do the sorry but. Actually, you're not sorry, you can't do it because there's something else that. So there was a brilliant book written many years ago called The Power of a Positive No. and
Hmm.
they sort of ban the sorry. And what they say is be positive. I would love to attend that event. Unfortunately, I'm already booked out. I would love to be involved in that. Unfortunately, there's 10 other things that currently take priority. So, but that's not the, oh, I'd love to, I'm really sorry, because that also diminishes you and diminishes your
Wow.
stature.
Yeah.
Yeah, it disempowers you. If you don't want to do it, be really clear about why it doesn't work for you. That said, you also need to be smart. In organizations, you need to understand power dynamics. You need to understand the decision makers. You need to build smart relationships with people. And there have been times through my career where I have done things, not because I wanted to, but because I did it to build a relationship with someone. So I was strategic about the reason. So with all of this, be smart, look at the landscape, understand where you want to get to, and hard work often pays off. Doing more often pays off. But if you're doing more, don't do it in the sacrificial lamb approach. Do it being, I'm empowered, I'm choosing to do this, and make sure people notice that you've done it.
I think that part is key. Making people know what you're doing. Because some people they feel like, oh, people would know that I'm doing it. Like can just no, people if you don't say it, no one knows. You may get lucky once in a while, someone will see you do it, but you need to be able to take stock and then tell people who are not your friends who their their whatever response they have doesn't really count, but people who need to know who when they're making decisions they would remember that. That's key, Michelle. That's key,
Yeah.
letting people know.
I remember many years ago a very senior HR person speaking at an event, and she said, when you do a piece of work, claim that work,
Claim it.
claim it as yours. Because if you don't, I might upset someone when I say this, but she said, but if you don't, there's going to be a man standing somewhere near you who's going to be very happy to
Happy to
claim that
claim it.
work on on your
And
behalf.
yes, and it may not even be the man who is your boss. I remember when I was in residency, I was with this younger, he was a med student, I was the resident, and I was asking a patient questions. I was asking this patient really tough questions. I'm like, were you trying to kill yourself? And the guy said yes, but he was the medical student, so he was writing things out. And then normally we would have the younger person present in the mornings when we're presenting with our attendants. And then he was presenting, and then he said, oh, he said he wanted to kill himself. And my attendant was like, how did you ask the question? And he said, I just asked it. I'm like, no, I didn't say that because he was still in training. I didn't need the glory at that point. I was already a doctor. I was just in training. I was just getting more training. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you did
Mm.
you. And he was a younger man, but he just jumped up and said, yeah, I just asked the question. I said, no, you didn't. I said that to myself. No, you didn't. But he claimed it. You're right. A man, it could be someone older, higher up the ladder or lower. They would claim it. Or it could also be another woman who would claim it. Someone else
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
So this show is called Negotiation Mastery. So personally, when I negotiate, my number one tool, my number one arsenal is knowing what I bring, the value that I add, knowing if no. If I'm negotiating for, if it's real estate, I'm like, what's the value of this real estate? But if it's a job or I'm coaching someone or I'm going to go speak somewhere, it's what value do I bring? So if I go inside of myself and say, what value do I bring? And once I know what value I bring to that person or to that organization, then that becomes my superpower. I know this job I'm going to go do, I'll kill it. So I know I can do it. And I know I can do it in a way that only Gloria can do it. Because I bring all of myself, all of my soft skills, all of my experience. I bring all of that to it. So what's your superpower when you negotiate?
I'm always willing to put myself out there and just ask for it. And I think, and I learnt that at a really, really early age. I was third year uni, and as part of third year uni, we had to do an internship. And so I was doing an internship at the local council. And the way the desks were structured, I was sort of, that's my front. My boss was sitting behind me. So he spent the entire internship looking at the back of my head. And on our I know, strange. But on the second last day, he says to me, I'm going to miss seeing the back of your head. And so I flipped my chair around and I said to him, well, we could change that, can't we? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you could give me a job. And he just looked at me and he goes, actually, what a great idea. So he was the deputy director. He went off and talked to the director, and they came back and said, "Here's a job offer." So I learned at a very early age that there's a way that you can, in a very casual sort of approach, ask for things that can be disarming and that doesn't put the other person on the spot. So even in that interaction, he could easily have batted it back of like, actually, the back of your head's not that interesting. I'm really not needing to see you that much. So yeah, there's lots of ways that he could have answered that wouldn't have put him in a way that he would have felt uncomfortable. And I've seen it time and time again, that sense of first mover advantage, that if you go into a conversation before the other person has thought about it or are ready for it, you are often far better prepared and you get a far better outcome.
Wow. Wow. Just but from what you said about yourself, it seems you kind of had your act together from the beginning. So how did you
Oh,
get?
no, no, no.
No, because no. Just from you finishing university, you worked with a politician. You've always been. You were brave. You took. You made decisions that were not in line with what your parents thought you would do. So where did that come from? Was it books? Was it your family? So if anyone has a child or a mentee that they're raising, they can take all the things that made you you, and then they can pour some of that into their kids and into themselves.
So I was the youngest of four. I
Ah,
grew up in a very, very smart family. And if you were to do an IQ test, I would not be as smart as the rest of my siblings. And so the whole way through school, I got the comparison thing from teachers and also from students. We had your sister last year. She's so smart. Oh, your brother's ducks, your sister's this, blah, blah. And so I really, high school for me was hard in particular. And the mantra in my head was, I'm not the smartest kid in the class, but I'll be the hardest working. And so I had a strong sense of belief that if I worked hard, I'd be able to make this work. I think I also found my feet when I went to university. So most of my siblings went to the university where my father was an academic. I, of course, went to the university where my father was not an academic. I did that deliberately. Um, and and that was for me, because I was the youngest, I needed to strike out on my own. I needed to feel like I was myself and finding myself. And uni was very transformative in that sense. And I think I did a lot of work in those early days to learn to like myself. And in learning to like myself, I realized that the only person who was going to back myself was me. And so I did. And then when you do it and it pays off, you go, oh, actually, this is a pretty good strategy. I should just keep doing this. And and that doesn't mean that I haven't had some hard times. Like I look through my career and I have absolutely worked incredibly hard. Things didn't come easy, but I was prepared to put the work in to make them work. Uh, I've had some amazing experiences. I've worked with some incredible people. I've also worked with some really horrible people as well. But you learn from all of that as well. And I look at what I do now and I think, it's the mixture of the good and the bad that enables me to be effective now. And I often say to people, when people say, oh, what is it that you do that's different to everybody else? And I said, I've got this ability to understand organizational dynamics and how that system works. And so if you're in a system and it's not working for you or for your team and you feel blocked somehow, I can help you find that way through. And I think it's just because of the amount of time I worked in lots of different contexts. And I
correct.
was often in environments where I was not the technical expert. When I was head of compliance, I was not a lawyer. I was not being hired as a technical expert. I was being hired because of my ability to navigate the system, influence relationships, influence outcomes. And that sort of ability to be able to do that is such a powerful trait. And I often say to people, when you're looking at your skill set, Yeah, technical skills are great, but eventually it's those influential skills, the ability to negotiate, that become far more important.
So one of your books is the Bad Boss. Can you talk a little bit about that book?
Well, I
And
can credit.
what made you write the book?
Okay, so I can credit that to my brother-in-law. We were chatting one day and he said to me, "You've got to write your next book about bosses." He said, because everyone's had, he called it bastard, because everyone's had an absolute bastard that they've worked for. He goes, "What a great title, Bastard Bosses." Anyway, so I'm floating it with my publisher and they went, not sure that we could go that title. It's a bit too strong. So we landed on Bad Bosses, but I was also very clear that when I wrote it, that I didn't want it to be a negative book, because in a relationship, everyone plays a part. And so the book is structured along the lines of, what do you do if you're working for someone who's not a great boss? And but also really challenging what you bring to the dynamic, your contribution, because is it that the person isn't a bad boss? You're just not a good employee. You're not a good team member. So, you've got to look at it from both sides. Then the next part is, if you're the bad boss, but also if you're managing a bad boss. Because if you think about it, in that dynamic, everyone plays a role. And so for me, the book is a book of hope, because it's about creating that environment where everyone can turn up, be their best, bring something to the table, but also own their part, be accountable for what they're contributing to the relationship.
But do you think bad bosses really know they are bad? Or they just think, oh, everyone else has a problem and not me? And then sometimes it's the employees. So how do you, how can you tease out how, because people don't have self-awareness. Only few people can actually go back and say, all right, I could have done this different. I could have done that different. It's always, oh, it's the other person. That person didn't like me. They never saw anything good in what I did. They just kept criticizing me. They let that person go early. When I asked for the same thing, they said no, but they don't put things in context. So how can you tease out if you are a bad boss or if you are a bad employee or if it's just a combination of both? How can you tease that out?
So read the book, because there's a whole heap of things that you can do. But most importantly, for the leader, one of the best things that you can do is go through a 360 process. So there are different tools that you can use, but the best enable you to stratify the data. So you get feedback from your boss, your boss's boss, your peers, your direct reports, from other people, could be suppliers or clients, and you fill it in as well. And then when you get the data, the stratification's great, because you get the comparison. This is how I see myself. This is how everybody else experiences me, but you look at that through the lens of those different categories, and then you're able to go, wow, isn't that interesting? So my peers see this, my direct reports see something different. Why is that? Why is it that I'm turning up in a different way? Or is it that they're filtering that and they're seeing something different? And, I've gone through 360 processes multiple times in my career. And what I found is it's the one thing that can really transform and elevate your self awareness, because you have data that you can look at. And it's, the good tools are built around sort of, adult development learning models, where you can look at it and go, these are the bits that if I want to be a better leader, I really need to shift and elevate. But I always say to leaders, being a leader is something that you have to want to do. And the
Mm,
challenge that we have in a lot of organizations is people want to move up. The only way to move up is to start managing people. But if you actually said to them, do you really want to manage a team? They'd go, no, I'd
no.
rather just stay down here doing my technical stuff. So what some organizations, not a lot, but some organizations do that dual track, where you can move up into an organization through that people leadership pathway or through a technical pathway. And to me, that's really valuable, because what it's saying is that technical role is valuable, but not everybody is cut out to be a leader. You have to
Correct.
want to be a leader, and you have to want to be a good leader.
Right. Right. Tell us a little bit about your other books.
So I got two others. So my first one that I wrote was called Step Up: How to Build Your Influence at Work. And that was very much couched on my experience when I was working as the head of compliance. Once again, I was not the technical expert. And what I saw was a lot of people around me who were very, very good technically, but they struggled to get their voice heard. They struggled to have that seat at the table because they didn't know how to influence. So that was the genesis for that book. It was really designed to help people who are technically focused, understand the value of why influence matters, but also here are the different elements that you can focus on that can elevate how you influence. And then the next one was career leap. So, how to reinvent and liberate your career. And that was once again, kind of a tap on the shoulder. I had a lot of people who said to me, Michelle, you've had this really weird career. How have you done what you've done? Uh, and that became I think I could turn that into a book. So I did.
Wow. So where can we find your books? I know your books are on your website. I know it's michellegibbons.com, or is it
It
.org?
is. It is.
Okay.
And you can also Amazon. So you'll get them through Amazon. They're on Kindle. You can buy hard copies depending on where you're located as well.
Okay. So I have two more questions before.
Okay.
Yes. So can you tell me about, because now you run your own business. Can you tell me about a time where you tried to negotiate and it didn't go as planned?
Negotiated and didn't go as planned. I think
Yeah.
early in my career, what I found really interesting was I was a very good negotiator in corporate in terms of negotiating salary. I knew my worth, I knew my value, I knew market rates. When I started the business, I found the negotiation around price points for pieces of work hard to do because I didn't know what to calibrate myself against.
Yeah.
And so I would say in my early days, there were definitely times where I pitched below market. And I look at it and I go, and it's that weird thing in the brain that if you price too low, people go, oh, they mustn't be all that good because they've
Yeah.
priced low.
Yeah.
And so it's that sense of, in any form of negotiation, really understanding where's the price point in the market, what's the low, what's the high, and where do you want to go. And I've learned that, feeling very uncomfortable with what you put out there as the figure, then you're usually asking for the right amount.
Okay. So if you are negotiating when you feel uncomfortable for what you're asking for, that's when. But how are you sure you're not just being greedy? You're asking for too much, and then you're like,
And then you might get knocked back. And that's the thing with negotiating. They can always say no.
that's right, that's right. And then what last negotiation tip do you have for my listeners?
With all of it, and this goes back to the value piece that you raised, and I couldn't agree more. It is so important to know your value and what you're worth. And I often say to people, and this can feel very transactional as I say this, but in a work environment, it's a value exchange. You
Yeah.
turn up and you deliver value, in return, you get paid. The more value you offer, the more you can articulate that value, the better you can negotiate. So don't rely on your organization to craft that value for you, to nurture that value. Do that yourself because the more you can do that, the more valuable you become. Therefore, when it comes to negotiating, one, it's easier, but also you've got leverage because you go, well, if I don't like this environment, I'm really valuable. I can go somewhere else. And you don't get that sense of feeling trapped.
Oh, that's so powerful. So where can we find you? Where can my listeners find you? Are you? I know you're on LinkedIn.
I am. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm not a TikToker. You will not find me on TikTok. Um, but also, the best places come to my website. I think, as you mentioned earlier, I share insights every week. And so, sign up for my insights. I'm very happy to share ideas. Goes back to my love of learning that I mentioned earlier. So, I love learning and I love sharing it with people. So, have been very happy to chat to you, Gloria.
Oh, Michelle, this has been a pure delight. Hopefully, we'll have another conversation soon.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Excellent. So, thank you so much for listening to this show. I have three asks for my listeners this week. Number one ask is go define your value so that the next time and not just define your value, define it and be able to articulate the value that you bring. You defining it, writing it somewhere, or just kind of having it in your brain flying around, that's not enough. Be able to articulate the value so the next time you negotiate, you have leverage. And my second ask is like this show, subscribe, share. And then the third ask is go be great. I truly believe you have the potential to be great. So go be great. Thank you.